Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and I am going to be radically changing my LEGO minifigure wall display. I've had these minifigures up on the walls for years, and now it's time to take it to the next level. One of my goals with this collection is turning it into a museum focused on LEGO history, and to do that, we're going to need specialized information plaques for all of the characters and the minifigures. And we're going to start off with my favorite minifigure-based theme, Ninjago. So here you can see I have all of the core ninja isolated in their individual segments. We have all the villains and all the civilians, and largely that organization is going to stay the same. What's going to be different though is that underneath each figure, I have custom ordered exclusive tiles that say the year they're from, what season, and the actual official name of the outfit they're wearing, and all the names of every single character to really make it into a museum quality display. One other major thing I'm doing is that so far I've only been showcasing the mainline minifigures that appeared in the mainline sets as well as the show. However, this excludes a lot of random variants that we get through books and European exclusive magazines. For instance, we might get the suit for one year but the hood from another. And while those technically I didn't really include on this minifigure wall display, they are official variants of the characters, and I'm looking for full completion here. So we're gonna go through every single figure, take everything down, and create a brand new gigantic display. It's gonna take up a lot more space, but I think the end result is gonna be so worth it. And it's the next step into transforming all of my minifigure displays under this one identified banner. And so, let's jump into this crazy process right now. So first of all, the way that I currently have my Ninjago minifigures set up is honestly really strange and particular. It pretty much just includes the main versions of all of the ninja suits and then all the villains and side characters. So basically, if there are versions of the characters without armor or random versions that we would get in the magazines, they aren't included. It's really only the main variations, and I've honestly just gone and sold the rest because I never thought I'd be needing to display more. It's honestly just been a labor of love and care for the theme that I've tried to organize them in the way that made the most sense to me. But if I'm going for a museum style display, I'm gonna need everything. And so I went down Bricklink and basically searched up every single Ninjago minifigure to find out all the different variations I was missing and meticulously put together a very detailed spreadsheet of all the minifigures I needed. This was a pretty insane task to undertake, even for Duckbricks, but I really wanted to make this look really special. I was inspired by the LEGO's official display for every single Star Wars minifigure that they showed off at Comic-Con and in New York, and I basically wanted to go for that exact same look and feel, except with even more information. Piecing together the Ninjago minifigures, though, turned out to be a much more difficult task than I thought. You see, we would randomly get different variations, like the 2016 version of Lloyd, but in a 2017 magazine, or maybe the 2018 version of Nia, but in a 2019 magazine, except that one had maybe a different color symbol or a different piece of armor used for it. And altogether, it was actually quite difficult trying to figure out what year every single variation was actually originating from, and what to actually call them on my description for the lower text. But eventually, I got them all listed out, and of course, the next step was to go to my favorite custom LEGO minifigure and tile printing service. Specifically, I use minifigfx.com, although there are a number of different services out there that do this, and I got a big bag of every single printed item after about a month and a half of waiting, which is completely understandable because I basically had them custom print every single tile, which meant they had to input every single one in by hand into their printing machine. Then came the sorting. I figured the easiest way to sort things was to first delineate out the most common characters that reoccur, aka the main 6 ninja, Kai, Cole, Jay, Zane, Lloyd, and Nia, and even Master Wu and Garmadon because they had quite a few variations of their own, and with that finished, it was then time to sort through, well, the rest of the tiles. But first, I wanted to test these out as a proof of concept. Could I actually put together a really nice wall display utilizing just the main original ninja and actually make it look good, especially with every single one of these tiles? So I took all the tiles right here and then went on over to my minifig walls. Sadly, I had to say goodbye to my color coding, which was a bit of a shame. I did really like how I color coded them, but sacrifices must be made. And before I knew it, Every single one of the Ninja minifigures were up there, and I had also devised a really good sustainable system to build very stable forms of bricks on base plates in order to mount the rest. I kinda wish I made up that system before I put the Ninja on, because the way I did the villains was honestly just a lot better because I now had this system. With that, I then had every single column sorted for each of the main villain factions, and it was actually really interesting seeing how some were a lot longer than others. Of course, this included side characters as well, so the side character column was just a lot longer in general, plus the civilian column was super long too, thanks to the Ninjago movie, but it was also really interesting just seeing how many different minifigures LEGO had decided to make when it came to specific individual factions. The final step was to take down my villain boards and create an entire new wall for the villains. Unfortunately, in the process, I also decided to take down a lot of the other frames to rearrange them and just completely dropped my Marvel frame at the same time. So, you know what? I think that's gonna be the next one because there is no way I'm putting that back up now. I soon had every single Ninjago minifigure up with a spot for all the ones I was missing. So let's go into that gigantic overview right now. Alright. And finally, the Ninjago wall display is complete. Every single ninja, every single side character, every single villain, and everyone in between is now depicted with a specialized printed tile for each of the characters. Now, of course, I am missing a couple of slots here and there, mostly for the random magazine figures or like the same figure but without armor that, unfortunately, I kind of just got rid of over the years because I never thought I would actually want to have them for display, but now that's coming back and biting me, so I will be in the process of getting all of the duplicate minifigures I need. Like, for instance, we have Jay in the honor robe, but then we also need one of him with the honor robe and the half mask. And then we have another one over here where it's like Digi-Cole with the armor, and then I need Digi-Cole without armor, because technically he did appear in a 4+ set without the armor. So it's kind of stuff like that that I'm missing. It's just variations of the same character, usually missing armor, but those are technically independent variants, so I did have to count them. Now, I went kind of crazy when counting these, because not only did I count every single minifigure from the retail sets, I also counted every single minifig from the European exclusive magazine packs. So for instance, let's take a look at Zane here, right? We have Zane in his hero armor without a clip on the back. We have Zane in the hero armor with a clip in the back, which is literally identical, except one of them has a clip mounted to the back to have the shield attached to it. And then we went as granular as saying, well, we also have Zane in the hero armor with hair because he appeared in a European magazine, technically as a special variation with the hairpiece. The same goes for even silly stuff like this, like Legacy Zane with a yellow face and no armor. Legacy Zane with a yellow face and armor. Legacy Zane with a silver face. Legacy Zane with a silver face and armor. And then we have like Legacy Zane, or I guess Armor Zane, with the yellow face, but with the regular season 11 suit. So there's a lot of weird stuff like that. So again, every single European exclusive magazine variant. But still, that's not all. I also included every single book variant as well. One of the weirdest ones here was that, like, for the official annual 2019 book that came out in 2018, we got a version of Sons of Garmadon Zane, which was identical to the other ones, except he had a clip with a harpoon on the back. So I did have to include that one. I was very, very, very particular to include every single possible variation there was for all the different figures here, and the same extends for these skeletons and these snakes and all the villains as well. So technically, this is like every unique Ninjago minifigure here already. There's just a lot of really silly variations that, to be technically 100% complete, I have to have them. Like, for instance, we have Knuckle with the hands faced this way, but the spinner had vertical hands, so he could actually hold weapons. So that is technically another version. I know it's kind of silly, and I know a lot of Ninjago collectors, myself included until I do this, would not even count that as a different variation. It's just not worth it. But I'm going for 100% complete, so that is why I am on this mission to have every single Ninjago minifigure. Let's take a closer look at an overview of all the different figures here and all the different categories, and of course, wrap up the video that way. Moving up to the beginning here, we have different columns for each of the ninja. 5 per column, or 5 per row here, so 5 for Kai, Jay, Zane, Cole, and 4 for Nia. And then we have Lloyd as his own section kind of down here. Starting off with Kai, we have pretty much every single variation. I want to call out the board game micro figure as one of the most interesting ones to include here. Of course, you have Energy Kai. He had a rocket pack in the Serpentine Rattlecopter, so I included that version as well. Mostly just trying to call out like the weird variations or the more interesting ones that we will get to. So slowly going down here, one strange thing is that we got Kai in the hunted robe with gunmetal gray armor, and then another set had the same minifigure but with silver armor. I don't know why they included 2 different versions, but that is still a different variation, so that is going to be appearing on the list once I am able to buy just another copy of that figure. We have Digikai with and without armor, and I did try to kind of mix and mash up the headpieces being used. Like, if there was a headpiece that is a unique headpiece for a certain figure, I tried to put it on. Like, for instance, the scared Kai expression there is from the Digikai minifigure, which obviously wasn't present on this one, but just to give it something different, I decided to give him a different facial expression. I recognize I am absolutely breaking my own rules for display here because, I mean, technically that's not the official version of the figure, but it made the most sense to me to set him up that way, so I just left it like that. Of course, we can then move on to Jay over here. Jay has his own set of variations, some of the rarest ones being the DX J as well as the Energy J here. But of course we have all the different variations. I tried to give him like the Starfarer comic book because he's a fan of those, so wanted to emphasize that. I think my favorite Ninjago, maybe second favorite Ninjago figure, it's up there, is Future J, where I had to specify this is the Tomb of the Spinjitzu Master Future Vision. And again, I literally just wrote all of these by hand based on my knowledge of the lore, so I really wanted to make this very, very special to really showcase in a museum-like display. We have that weird variation of J who came in the Merchant J polybag, so I had to include that one there as well. Just all sorts of interesting stuff. And then of course we get to the newest figures down here. Moving onwards, we have Zane, and Zane is probably the one I have messed with the most. Like, Zane DX, I've given him his robotic face as well as the blueprints for Zane, which didn't come out until 2016, but it made sense to include as his accessories because, of course, the very iconic TikTok episode where he found out he was a robot was there. And then I used the face for Tournament Zane for the battle damage version of the Techno robe because it actually did something special that had the electronic detail wrapped around the side of the head. So obviously that isn't the original head they used there, but I just had to include it for this figure. And then for the Tournament Zane, which is technically just not even canon, they had a half human, half robot mode for him, and it didn't make sense to me because the tournament took place after he turned into a robot, so I just made him full robot for this one. So again, it's little stuff like that. I've made little modifications to the figures to just make them make a bit more sense to me, but for the most part, they are pretty much all accurate. Need to get a hairpiece here. Obviously, some of them are missing bits and pieces of information. Like, we technically never got a black Woo Crew version of Zane, so I never made a printed tile for him, and then I realized, well, it's kind of incomplete without it, so I created that one just as an extra figure. Just stuff like that to add on to my displays. And then all together we get to the bottom where finally we have the big robot version of Zane, and yes, I am counting that as a minifig of its own, and it will have a separate printed tile when I get around to printing the tiles for the brand new wave. Moving on, we've got Cole over here. Cole is pretty straightforward. I'm actually not really missing that many versions of Cole. I actually think I have most of the ones I need to get, aside from like Digicole with no armor, Cole with hero armor and no clip, so just another version of Hero Cole. But yeah, otherwise it is pretty much 100% complete for him. I also do want to point out that it's interesting how Kai has by far the most suits. I even included something like the Minecraft suit, which technically wasn't even in a Ninjago set, but I just wanted to include it because it clearly is Kai in the Resistance robe, and I put it with the 2020 Prime Empire stuff because, you know, you can imagine that's kind of in the video game style of realm. But then you move on to here, and literally because of Kai, I had to extend everything down by another row, but then every other ninja just has like rows and rows where I'm not gonna fill this up for years on end, but it is what it is. You know, Kai is always special. He gets every gimmick, he gets all the special variations, so it made sense that he would have the most variations. Finally, we have Nia over here and all the different versions of Samurai X. Again, I've done some different things to play around with it, like giving the original Samurai X the accurate goggles that we got for the 2016 Samurai X, and then of course swapping around different designs for like the black suit version of it from Skybound and all sorts of stuff like that. So I did some tomfoolery with the heads to make them make more sense to me, but then overall we just have all these different versions of Nia as we cascade on our way down with the phenomenal Energy Master of the Sea version right there. The only thing that I do feel like maybe I would have changed about this display, but it's too late now, is that every time we had a taller character, I had to like extend them out past the base, and then they would just cover up the sign. Like this is completely covering whatever this sign is saying. It's like 10th anniversary golden ninja right there, but sadly you just can never read that because it's going to be blocking it. Maybe the next time I reconfigure this, I will just add a lot more space in between the rows. One very clever workaround I had to do here to attach the Scuba Ninja I want to highlight is that instead of just placing them on the standard 1x2 brick, I lowered this brick down by 1 and then attached one of the newer bar elements to the feet there, which of course attach up to the flippers, which you can use to actually mount your minifigures, which is a very easy fix. Altogether, we've got all sorts of different minifigures here, even the newest ones, and then finally we can move on to Lloyd. Lloyd is an interesting one because we get a lot of different variations of him, like Legacy Lloyd as well as the younger version. So this obviously, despite it being Legacy and coming out later, I tried to put it in somewhat chronological order in the way that made sense. I forgot that the LEGO movie technically gave us an exclusive version of Lloyd because it was the standard Green Ninja, but with the regular Lloyd head, which you can see right there. All of the other ones for this version of the Green Ninja use the child Lloyd head. So technically this is an exclusive variant. I will make a new printed tile for that. So there's little stuff like that where it's just like I gotta go in and clean this up, but altogether, here's all the different versions of Lloyd. I also included Possessed Lloyd, aka Morrow, because I felt like it just made the lineup complete, and yes, that did mean I did have to get another copy of it because I did want to showcase him on the Ghost side as well, and the same can be said for like the Ice Emperor Zane, which also just made sense to include in the Zane lineup, but also for the villain lineup where he appears right there for the villains as well. Moving on for the rest of Lloyd, there were a lot of different ones for the Ninjago movie. The really annoying one is that the collectible minifigure version of Lloyd is identical to the regular version, except it just has a head that doesn't have 2 expressions on it. It actually is worse than the regular version, which is so whack, but I guess I need to find the CMF in my collection now. There's all sorts of ones here that I just need to have to be fully complete. And then finally, you've got all the different variations here. I decided to create my own crystallized suit hood, which is the only created minifigure here because it just made sense to have that as a variation. But then altogether, we get to the latest versions and we can move on. Now we get to some of the interesting ones, because here I managed to include some of these side characters, and yes, Sensei Wu did get a board game microfigure as well. We have all sorts of different versions of Master Wu here, and this is a little bit annoying because the Hands of Time version of Wu was the same as the Day of the Departed version, except it had a tan hat, and the Day of the Departed version had a golden hat, and I did not realize that, so I sold my other version of Wu, so I just need to buy him back again. Just a lot of things that I owned all of these at one point, but then I was like, oh, I don't need an identical version of Wu, let me just sell him on auction, and that's where a lot of these other figures went, so I just need to rebuy minifigs I've already sold, which is very silly, but you know, to have the complete collection, it's something I gotta do. Moving on to the next layers here, I did leave an empty spot for the employee campus, employee special gift version of Sensei Wu, who is dressed up as Magisto the Wizard, who is an exclusive figure that I really want and hopefully will have on the way soon. Next up after Wu, of course, Garmadon made the most sense to include. We have all the different versions of Garmadon from the movie as well as the show, and for the Oni form of Garmadon, yes, I did modify him to have the 4 arms because, I mean, why not? He was just asking to be modified right there. Then we have the different versions of Misako down here, so just the next character to showcase, and then Pixel, who's kind of like the next important character with the 2023 version, or 2025 version, my apologies, right there. We then have the different versions of Dareth. Then we have the parents of the ninja, so Ray and Maya, the former Elemental Masters. We have Ed and Edna Walker, these statues of Lily, which I guess were never officially confirmed to be statues of Lily, but given that they appeared in coal-oriented sets, I think it makes sense to include both of these as Lily. And then we get to the Elemental Masters. We have Skylar, the Master of Amber, Karloff, Master of Metal, Turner, Master of Speed, Tox, Master of Poison, both versions, including the one from Ultra Agents, which means that I will have to redo my Ultra Agents wall because I did, of course, take her from the Ultra Agents wall, so I have to buy another copy of those figures right here to make that wall complete. And I'm going to be redoing this anyway to have the same exact type of styles, so all of my wall displays eventually will be migrating over to this design. We've got Mr. Pale, the Master of Light, Neuro, the Master of Mind, Ash, Master of Smoke, and note that I did have to say he is the former Elemental Master of Smoke here, and Shade was confirmed to be the former Elemental Master of Shadow because there is a new Master of Shadow in town. Belobo is the Master of Nature, Gravis is the Master of Gravity, Jacob Pevsner, Master of Sound, and finally Camille, Master of Form. I did make a typo here. This obviously came out for Legacy in 2021, not Tournament of Elements, so I actually do need to order another tile for this one too. Again, there are small little mistakes I've caught as I've put this together, but by and large, I was kind of impressed how I got almost everything. Then we have Ronan, Little Nelson over here, and then I kind of just went through the seasons and tried to go in order of the different side characters like the Postman and Captain Soto, Echo Zane and Ty D, Hutchins, Mistake, Clutch Powers. I guess Mistake was technically from the Ninjago movie, but that was her official name in that set. Akita in both the wolf form and the human form. Okino. Scott, and then Scott with a neck bracket, so I just need to get another copy of him. Blazy H. Speed, formerly known as Racer 7, Princess Vanya, who is now Queen, Prince Benthamar, Hound Dog McBragg, Euphrasia, the new Elemental Master of Wind, 2 copies of the Spirit of the Temple because I wanted to, 1, emphasize that they are split spirits, because canonically there are 2 of them, and then of course to showcase the 2 different facial expressions, one of which came in the magazine. I don't do this normally for characters that have 2 different facial expressions, like I wouldn't get another copy of them just to showcase, but it made the most sense here because his first appearance was as a split spirit, so there were 2 identical minifigures. Then we have Roby Blecht, a Temple Guard. I saw one of the new magazine figures will have a Temple Guard without the armor as part of the magazine, so I left an open space for that. We have Aaron here, and actually there's a variation I can't show on camera yet, so I'm going to go ahead and remove him. We have the rarest Ninjago minifigure ever here, which is the Comic-Con version of Ryu, supercharged with dark blue as the coloration. Very special one to get. And then we have some of the other civilians like Mother Doomsday, Gail Gossip, the News Crew. I tried to kind of sort these by like food-themed ones, so we've got like news and entertainment, and then we have food-themed ones, so we have like different chefs over here and all sorts of different merchants and vendors, and then we have just the generic ninja apprentices from Core, and then we just get to some of the more generic minifigs, like Patty Keys was a named character, but she was just kind of a generic civilian, so that was just a TV show Easter egg. And then you have all the different Ninjago City civilians here. Some of the hats are not correct, like I just didn't have the right hat on some of these, so I do need to fix that. Don't know why that one's bending down so much, so let me get that one fixed. But yeah, even for the most part, including like the generic baby that did appear in the LEGO Ninjago movie, all of those are factored into here. Finally, as we get down here, these are just like the inanimate objects and robots. So we have the mannequins from the Ninjago City set. I'm missing one of them for some reason, so I just need to get that one to replace. We have the random robots that we got in polybags, which are literally just sitting in my collection somewhere. I don't know where they are, but I will find them and place them here. We have the different robots here. We have the training dummy from 2011, the snowman from the employee Christmas gift, and then we have like 2 generic skeletons which appeared in some sets, and I just need to go grab those to add them to the display. And then finally, one last slot for the baby dragon here, and I'm going to do another slot for the Source Dragon spirits that we just got earlier this year. Moving on to the villains, of course, I want to showcase the Skulkin up top here. Very cool to get Samakai showcased here and all the different variations of the villains. Of course, we have all the Skulkin right here, including the LEGO Games microfigures, and then the different versions of Pythol P. Chumsworth, which you can see I kind of had to alternate on different platforms to kind of just make sure that they didn't collide with the tails. Then you have Scales, leader of the Hypnobrai, as well as all the different Hypnobrai, including Mesmo Jr. from the employee Christmas gift in 2021, which is just the Legacy Mesmo, except he has a scarf and short legs, which is very funny. Radla and Serpentine Warrior are actually identical, but technically those are 2 different named characters. One of them is a generic Serpentine, and one of them is Radla from Legacy, so I had to include 2 copies. And this is something that is maybe going to be a little bit controversial, so it's going to be very obvious when you get to the ghosts, but like, for example, right here, right? These 4 minifigures are basically identical. Cowler with a scabbard, Pyrus, and Cyrus are all identical minifigures. However, in certain sets, they were marketed under these different names, so I just bought multiple copies of the same minifigure just to showcase that, yes, they did have different names. I could have just done Cowler / Pyrus / Cyrus, but honestly, I thought that would be kind of lame, and the more the merrier, so I figured why not make them individual slots. Moving on from that, we have the rest of the Serpentine, the Fangpyre, which we still have not seen in Legacy yet. Kind of crazy how we haven't seen any of those, but I guess it makes sense that none of the molds they decided to bring back, so we never got a newer version of the Fangpyre. For the Venomari, we have, I think, the most Serpentine minifigures because there are just so many different variations made for Legacy. Snakes are often associated with being green, so it makes sense that they would be green here. And I even have the Juniors one here from 2016 for the Snake Showdown. Next, we have the Constricti over here, and then we get into the Overlord. So the Overlord and the Warriors of Stone were the next ones to showcase, and here I had to play around with the timeline a bit because obviously you have the Legacy versions of the Overlord technically as the evil spirit, and then you have the Golden Master version of the Overlord, and then the Crystal King version from 2022. So all sorts of different variations here, but given that they're all the same character, it made sense to showcase the evolution of this figure. And then you get to the Stone Warriors, and yes, I did include the giant Stone Warrior here, and I made a special display plaque for him as well. I thought about sticking that like on the chest here, but I just decided to put it right next to him because I just didn't want to cover up any of the detailing for the samurai armor on the chest. Moving on to here, we have the other different variations of the Stone Warriors. So many different variations, including some swapped color face versions that appeared in a minifigure pack in 2013. Kind of weird how they did that, but yeah, these are technically different variants. I don't know why that one isn't pressed all the way down. There we go. Just kind of fixing little things here. And then we get to the Ninjroids, so Cyrus Borg and the Overborg version of him, and then all the different Ninjroids. And yes, I am missing the most here because there were just like random silly versions of the Ninjroids I didn't bother keeping track of. Like, it's this minifigure but with a neck bracket. And then we have this minifigure but with plain black legs for some reason. And then we have the one that came in the Dareth versus Ninjroid polybag that was that minifigure but with a single expression and no printing on the back of the head. It's kind of just weird stuff like that that I've managed to factor in here that, yes, I did have to count as all of the figures here, so that's why I just decided to make a special listing for all of them and then figure out how to get the duplicates later. Next up, we move into 2015 with Master Chen, but of course, I had to showcase the Mr. Chen statue first because that's kind of like the civilian version of him from 2021's Ninjago City Gardens. And yes, we do have the cape and no cape version. Klaus has been equipped with his book from the Tournament of Elements 2021 Legacy set, and of course I had to include the polybag European exclusive version as well, which was identical to the other version except this one had the dark red hood. We have the different versions of Izor here, and clearly I had poor planning here because I had to make these ones sit down to fit underneath the legs of the Stone Warrior, and if I were to redo like everything, I would probably like shift over these two and just have everything be shifted over by one, but that is not a very exciting prospect to me, so instead they're sitting down as a compromise. We do have all of the different masters over here for the Anachondri Cultists, and then we get to the Ghosts, Morrow, including the new 2025 version, which I do need to make a new plaque for, as well as all the different ghosts are represented here, and yes, many of these are doubled up, like Attila, Ming, and Spider are identical, Hackler is the same figure, but with a kind of scabbard on the back, same for Yokai, and then we get some of the unique ones like Wu, Howla, Gurkha, and Whale, and Pitch, which are technically all slightly different. Of course, we have so many different variations of the ghosts, and yes, Karen is the 2021 Legacy Ghost who is identical to the Ghost Warrior, although technically I just classified them as separate things because again, it's a similar thing to all the other characters on the list. If they officially were under two names and marketed as two different names, I have to have two copies of the figure. I also realized I completely forgot to print out a tile for the Screamers, but I do want to showcase them here, so that's why they're just kind of sitting there, and I will have a printed tile to remedy that very soon. Then we get into 2016 with the Sky Pirates. We have Natakan the Djinn as well as the entire crew, both with the epaulets as well as the armor, because of course they did feature armor in the second wave. And this is kind of how I solved the Big Fig issue and trying to mount Big Figs on this display. I have a custom brick-built stand just using the pieces I had around for the Big Fig. I'm going to clean this up with slopes and tiles to kind of finish off the open studs here once I actually get the right pieces. But for now, I think it is just a good representation because, again, this is a total work in progress. Moving onwards, we have the rest of the pirates. I also forgot a tile for Monkey Wretch, so that is why he is tile-less right now. And then again, Buff Million is kind of covering up like all three versions of Siren here, which is a little bit unfortunate. Moving onwards, we have all the different other versions of the standard pirates. And then finally, I do want to showcase that we have the next up, Day of the Departed. Also, just one of the rare times I included both versions of the same minifigure with two different heads here, just because I just felt like the Day of the Departed needed more representation because the rest of the resurrected villains are with their respective categories. Then we have the Hands of Time, just to flex, and I guess also because I wanted to showcase what they look like with the hair or the hoods on. I got multiple copies of Crux and Acronix to showcase here, plus Young Crux from the Bertober pack, but everything else is pretty much standard. We have all the Vermilion, including the one random Vermilion warrior that we got as part of the foil pack for the magazines with snakes coming out of his back. Then we have the LEGO Ninjago movie villains, and this is where things got a little complicated. As you can see, there are a lot of different variations that are missing, and that's probably just because they're scattered around my collection. They made so many different versions of these with like slightly different heads or slightly different air tanks, so I need to go back and like figure out everything that goes to what, but for the most part, I think this is like almost everything. There's a ton of generic thugs that I need to include multiple times just because they are listed under slightly different figures, or like this one has small knee pads and this one has big knee pads, so it's just kind of that sort of thing. But then we get back to the show, and here we get to Harumi and the Sons of Garmadon. Of course, despite there never being a casual version of Harumi, we did get a number of different variations of her throughout the years. We've got the 3 versions from 2018, and then we have Avatar Harumi from Prime Empire, and then finally the Crystallized Harumi. We don't talk about this one. Moving on from that, we have Mr. E, who was the main lieutenant here, as well as General Mr. F, because it just made sense as the next iteration of Mr. E, Ultraviolet, and then Kilo utilizing the same exact style of Big Fig display that I've got going on for Dogshank up there. Moving onwards, we have the other members of the Sons of Garmadon here, including the Bertober exclusive one with arm printing. That one was very nice to get, and leg printing as well. And then finally, we round up the gang with just the other Sons of Garmadon members until we get to the Dragon Hunters. One thing I did change is that, yes, we did get an official minifigure of Faith in the magazines with hair, but it had the wrong hairpiece and armor, so I just decided to make my own custom version with the correct hairpiece and no armor, which just made a lot more sense to me. I might switch it back to the actual official version, but it just feels so weird to not have the right hairpiece when it's literally right there. Moving onwards, we have the rest of the Dragon Hunters. This is a really silly and dumb variation that, again, by my rules, I had to play by, where one version of him has like printed pieces on the side and the other person just has plain back tiles, but everything else is the same. So again, just kind of 2 random variations of Daddy No Legs because of that. And then we get to the Oni. I gave the Omega Oni a cape, as he should have. I felt like just him not having a cape in the set was very disappointing, so I just gave him the Lego Batman cape from the Lego Movie 2 sets, which I thought just worked out really well. You've got like the Cloak of Shadow going all around him. And then we go into Season 11. Asphira starts off here. We have the other version of her from 2022 there, and then we have the different Pyro Vipers, then the Ice Blizzard Samurai, all showcased right here, and then for Prime Empire, I decided to start off with the mechanic, actually. I was kind of going back and forth as to, like, where do I put the mechanic, and it made the most sense here because this is where he really stepped it up and started to affect the plot in a significant manner. I thought briefly about putting him, like, all the way back with the Skybound stuff, or if we really want to get particular about the lore, Tommy Andresen confirmed the mechanic was once a member of Captain Soto's crew back in the day. You can see a member of the pirate crew with the same facial features as a mechanic,
When Captain Soda went down, he then found employ with Master Chen, so then I guess I could include him with Master Chen, although he never appeared in 2015. It was just stated that that was his backstory, until Skybound, where he met him in prison. He said he used to be a delivery truck driver for Chen, the ninja brought Chen down, so then he was sent to jail, and then he just reappeared a number of different times, like he appeared in the opening of Season 8, so it was so complicated to the point where I was like, let me just put him with Prime Empire, because that's when he actually started to do stuff and unleash Unagami. And yes, technically, there is another version of Unagami with transparent cylinders underneath him. I'm very annoyed that that is a different variant on Bricklink, but because it is, I have to get another copy. I also wanted to have a special section for Tsushimi's Sushi because it kind of felt like a character of its own, and for stuff like LEGO Nexo Knights, I do depict the random like stone blocks as their own characters, so it just made the most sense to me to actually be able to just give these little tiny creatures their own light here. Of course, we have the red visors, the different types of whack rats with and without armor here, and then we get to the Skull Sorcerer, where yes, we did get a slightly different crystallized version with a plain black head in the magazines instead of the printed head, although externally, you can't even tell the difference. We have all the different variations of the Geckos and Munts here. Here I've swapped the armor around because he was marketed as both Mert, the named Munts, as well as just a generic Munt, so I was like, okay, well, might as well make them a bit different. And then we move on to the island, not a lot of figures there. We then next have the Seabound minifigures. Glutinous, I am still kind of trying to figure out how to attach him to the studs, so stay tuned, he will be coming very soon. And then we get to Crystallized Misdemeanor, made the most sense to start off here, the Crystal Spider, and then the different Vengestone minifigures, because the Overlord and Crystal King himself, as well as the entire council, are split up across the actual characters, which also just made the most sense to me. Between that, we have all the different core minifigures, so all the different core snakes, and then all the different core skeletons here, just a whole variety of different types of figures, until we finally get to Dragons Rising, the different versions of Lord Raz, and yes, I am missing the nameplates for some of the magazine ones, and we're getting another magazine one with like giant red claws out of the back, I think like next year, so this one is just on its way. Then we have, this was probably the longest tile I made, just because I was curious how long I could make it. Empress Beatrix Vespasian Oris, from the realm of Imperium, the good Empress, protector of the true path. I thought about putting her entire title on there, but I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have fit. So this was about as tight I could have made it. But then next up, we have all the different Imperium soldiers. We then go into the Blood Moon era. So we have Jordana over here, and then Cinder, the Wolf Mask Warriors. And then I do have to censor one of these right here, but next up we have the Wolf Mask Warriors, Guards, Generals, and then spaces for the Forbidden Five. I do actually know the elemental powers of all of the other members of the Forbidden Five, but I do not want to spoil them, so I'm just going to cover those up right here. I just made the tiles in advance, but it is all of the different members that we presumably will be getting next year. Again, hopefully, this is just fingers crossed speculation, of course. And then, of course, we have the Dragonian Warriors over here, which are really, really nice minifigs that I still do need to make the tile plates for. And that's it. That is every single minifigure from the villain faction, for the side characters, and then for the main ninja heroes of Ninjago. This is a pretty crazy undertaking, and I don't really know if I'm gonna even be able to do it for the rest of the figures. I think the next one I want to do it for is LEGO Marvel. This is a section that I really want to highlight, and these are just the heroes. The villains I actually had to remove. I had a villain plate right here, and I completely took it down to make space for the Ninjago one, so I'm gonna completely redo all the Marvel ones next. I think that one's the most exciting one to do next, and then I guess I'm gonna have to do DC. I'm like avoiding Star Wars because that's gonna kill me to make like 2,000 or 3,000 or however many tiles there are for every single minifigure that exists for Star Wars, but I do own them all, so I guess it does make sense to showcase them. Why not? I think next, collectible minifigures would make sense as well to do under this style of display because each of them have their own official names. And then, I don't know, you tell me what I should do next. I am partial to Lord of the Rings, so maybe Lord of the Rings. Oh, actually, I know what I want to do. I want to do the Bionicle Kanohi. I want to show all the names. I want to show the power. Oh my gosh, that's going to be really cool. That's what's next. That's, yeah. It's the Kanohi. Okay, I know what I'm doing next. So obviously this is a long way to go. My eventual goal is to have every single minifigure that I have currently on display, for every theme on display, to have specialized tiles of their own. It is a very, very ambitious idea, and I genuinely do not know if I will ever get there. Again, you can see the collection is in complete disarray because I've been reorganizing all of these minifigure tiles that I've just kind of placed on the floor for now, like the poor spacemen over there are just stranded. But that is the goal, is to be able to label every single minifigure. We'll see if I ever get there, but I definitely have my order of priorities here. And let me know what you think of this brand new type of display for my LEGO minifigures. I think it just looks a lot nicer than the honestly pretty cluttered displays that I have right now. Nothing really wrong with that, and I am very space efficient with the cluttered displays, but it is something, there's something very satisfying about being able to be like, oh yeah, this is that minifigure from this year, this is the official version of it. And while most of this information is like in my head, like I have all this memorized, I just think it'd be really cool to have for a museum style display to actually just really granularly showcase like what's the deal with every single one of these different types of minifigures here. And also just so I can show guests and folks visiting what types of minifigures there are to collect, the history behind them, and just kind of have it act as its own interactive exhibit. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. And bye for now.